Welcome everybody to the LinkedIn for Cannabis Professionals webinar, how cannabis professionals can get the most value from using LinkedIn. We want to welcome you and wish an extra special happy birthday to one of our fellow presenters, Matthew O'Brien. Happy birthday. And also, we hope all of you brought a notebook, you've got a nice glass of water, and you're sitting comfortably. We're going to jump right in. Today's webinar is brought to you by Good Feels, sparkling cannabis beverages and fast-acting tinctures. We've also got 4 p.m., bringing you your daily news and insights of the cannabis industry. Good ideas, outing foul play to build a better industry for all of us, and also head stash marketing, focused on working with all the best companies with the best products, and finally, multi-chain ventures, mixing cryptocurrency and blockchain technology with cannabis. Let's meet our presenters today. First, Matthew O'Brien, the birthday man himself from 4 p.m. Brett Puffenbarger from Good Ideas and Multi-Chain Ventures. And finally, yours truly, Matthew Herold from Good Feels and Head Stash Marketing. Thanks for coming, everybody. Now, we're going to start off by talking about why are we doing this? What's the point of this presentation? And I'm going to go ahead and have Matthew O'Brien start that off.
Thanks, Matt. So for myself, the reason as to why I felt a desire to put this event on is that there's this sort of classic mindset that, you know, for someone to fail or for someone to succeed, someone else has to fail, commonly referred to as like a zero-sum mindset. And I think to a certain extent that is sort of growing in influence within the cannabis industry, but at the same time, I feel like each and every one of us have the opportunity to contribute towards the culture of cannabis we would like to exist. And as part of that, we said to ourselves, like, how do we actually put that into practice? And we came together and we felt that if we were to share all the insights that have, you know, really helped us get to where we are today on the platform and have really helped us sort of excel our businesses on the platform, that would be a very nice contribution to say, we very much believe that, you know, everyone in this industry can succeed and no one has to fail for someone else to succeed.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. I think we all share that sentiment. And Brett, what would you add to that?
You know, I think the big precipice for doing this was the fact that we've never met each other, not in real life. We all became friends and started kind of interacting and working together using this platform. And I think all of us have seen exponential growth in our careers because of this platform. And I think for me, I owe a debt of gratitude to the community that supports me and my page and the things that I post about. And I think we all kind of collectively agreed on that. And it was one of those things where it was almost by popular demand. I know a few people had asked, you know, each one of us separately or together to put something like this on. And for me, this is the easiest way we can give back and help other people do exactly the same things we do. And I kind of live by the idea of we're stronger together. So why not encourage others to see the same success we have?
I share that sentiment. And, you know, to add to that, really another goal that we're trying to have here is to empower everybody attending this webinar so that I think there's a lot of shared viewpoints and perspectives on how to build a better industry. And so what we hope to do is give you all tools that you can pull away so that collectively we can support each other and be more successful in building the type of industry that all of us want to see 10, 20 years down the line. So what we'll cover today, we're going to start with why does this matter to you? What's a personal brand? What's the value in using LinkedIn specifically for cannabis? Also, why now? Why is LinkedIn hot? The network is your net worth. We're going to touch on that mindset when approaching this before we get into where to start on LinkedIn. That's going to include building your profile, the value of starting with comments, and then ultimately we're going to get into creating content on LinkedIn. Finally, we're going to touch on growing on LinkedIn. Why does certain content go viral? We'll touch into that. We'll also get into the algorithm hierarchy based on our collective observations as well as our research. We're also going to touch on measuring what matters, and that's going to include really sinking into goal setting. Finally, we will end with best practices for LinkedIn. That's posting on LinkedIn. We'll go a little bit deeper, building out your profile, sending direct messages, what's the proper etiquette, And finally, LinkedIn Premium, yay or nay? So why does this matter to you? And what is a personal brand? What's important about building a personal brand? Matthew O'Brien, can you start us off and share your thoughts? You have a lot to say about this.
For sure, and thanks for that, Matt.
Sure.
So to sort of unwind the clocks, going back to high school, like the extent of the education we received on the internet was that, pretty much anything you said on the internet could inevitably come back to haunt you in negative ways. Like if you said something, which perhaps was a reflection of your lack of maturity in your youth, at the point which you sought employment, that might come back to sort of bite you in the ass. And I think what we've all noticed is that really on LinkedIn, the opposite is true. So what a personal brand is, it really is, your career, your actions, your values, your beliefs, your skills, and your perspective. So to define what is personal branding, it's the intentional act of telling the world who you are and how you can add value. And the way in which we've sought to do that is very different from one another. However, we all are very sort of cautious as to what we put out into the world, such that it is very much in line with how we define ourselves as people.
It's a great point. I certainly relate to that. And Brett, what do you want to add to that?
So I think the good thing about a personal brand is that it's a long-term solution for people in their career. It's something that can follow them from company to company. It can grow with them from a very beginning of a career all the way up into the executive levels. And it's just something that can be helpful. You know what I mean? I've seen a lot of people put up things like, well, if you build your brand big enough, you'll never have to apply for a job again in your life. Or if you really want to be the person who succeeds in an industry segment, be the first person someone thinks of in a given niche within the industry or within your role in the world. And I think building a successful personal brand is one of the easiest, if not the easiest and most direct ways to achieve that. It's like being able to put a stamp on a specific segment of the industry or chunk of the world that is all you. And I think that's a hugely successful thing for us in our own careers. And I think it's something that others can do just as well, if not better than we can.
It's a great point. And so to bring that sort of together, part of this is when you build that personal brand and you are authentic the way Matthew O'Brien first described, you build a presence that's based on something that's not going to be in conflict with who you are. And the opportunities that you attract ultimately are going to be ones where you can be yourself. And that will lead to better results. You will be more productive. You'll be more happy. You will have a greater satisfaction. And I think when you find those types of conditions where you can express your hard skills, your soft skills, and all of your professional value, it's going to lead to a much better experience for everybody, yourself and those that you're surrounded by. And to Brett's point, when you can carry it somewhere else, it's one of those things where you don't have to rely so much on everybody else. However, we're going to touch on how important that network is, and it becomes an extension of who you are in this personal branding work. So why is this important to you? What's the value in using LinkedIn specifically for cannabis? And Brett, you're going to go ahead and lead us on this one.
So I think using LinkedIn specifically kind of starts with the social media landscape of the cannabis industry as it is. So a lot of social media sites don't necessarily allow us to exist in the ways we would want. There's always the risk of being shadow banned or violating the community standards. And I think something people are shocked to realize is that LinkedIn is the opposite. It has welcomed us with open arms. It has allowed us into its doors and to use it to the greatest of abilities. And I think the fact that we're now in this kind of beginnings of post-pandemic world where the world went largely digital, it's made the cannabis industry a much smaller place. And pretty much the who's who and the zoo of cannabis now exists right here on LinkedIn. And I think a big piece of that is that LinkedIn is the world without gatekeepers. You can go straight to the decision makers. You can go straight to the people in charge. You can go to the people that you look up to and interact with them right now, today. They're all there. They're all interacting. They're all participating together. And it's allowed a real sense of community to grow just like ours has between the three of us. I mean, Matthew O, you're 3,000 miles away from where I am. Matthew H, you're, 1,500 or 1,000 miles away from me. We kind of make this big worldwide triangle. And I think that's a beautiful thing that we could come together all thanks to this platform to achieve something like this. And I think the same can go for pretty much anybody in the cannabis industry at this point. We're so spread out geographically, but so together every day right here on this platform.
Very good points. I know I personally love learning from each of you about your local surroundings and what's happening in the cannabis industry, because I can't have those eyes except through meeting people like you and LinkedIn. Matthew, what would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I think to the point we're going to make in the next slide, like the cannabis industry today in its current form is inherently global. And what's super interesting about LinkedIn in particular is that it allows you to develop those relationships regardless of geographical positioning. Like for myself, I'm in Ireland. For yourselves, you're based in the United States. Even looking at the chat here, like there's people from all corners of the world: Portugal, Austin, Vancouver Island, Prince Edward Island, all across North America and all across Europe. And what's really interesting about LinkedIn is that it just allows you to connect with anyone from anywhere, all on this one location.
It's the best part about it. I know we were talking earlier, my very first time being on a podcast was with Vipin over in India. Shout out to the Ganja Show. And it was just such an amazing experience to talk to someone who's seeing what's happening in India and giving me those insights. There's really there's no experience like it. So that's really where we're coming from. Now, the question also comes to why now? Look at LinkedIn's explosive user growth. The number of people using LinkedIn has doubled in the past 5 years, moving from 350 million global users to over 700 million users in 2021. Support for the cannabis industry? Well, LinkedIn remains one of the only social media platforms that have so far embraced the cannabis industry. They've allowed those commerce conversations to happen, people talking about wholesaling, various things like CBD, and there hasn't been much pushback from the platform. They've really let it happen all out in the open, and it's something we're very grateful for. Another thing is that we started to touch on is once the pandemic hit, we had this frantic increase in people interacting through LinkedIn, simply because you had what was traditionally all of these meetups, conferences, networking events that now were impossible. And so LinkedIn was positioned perfectly that everyone flooded right to it because it was the only thing presenting itself as a pre-established platform where people could connect, not only globally, but also even close by, people within your own state. Brett, what would you add to that?
So I think the interesting thing is that if you ask anybody a year ago, 18 months ago, what LinkedIn was, most people would say, oh, that's just your online resume. That's all it's good for. It's good for people who are hunting for jobs. And I think right around the onset of the pandemic, it became a new thing. It became a true social media site where content creation was going off, where people were interacting. And I think we're still kind of seeing that explosive growth. So I think right now is the time above all times to really start getting involved with LinkedIn and being participatory on LinkedIn because it is growing so rapidly and because it is one of the few places that has accepted us with such openness. And I think that's basically it. The time is now just in general in society for beginning to build a personal brand. And I think it just so happens to coincide with the way LinkedIn has chosen to grow itself. And you can kind of see that it's an intentional shift on their part to become more of a true social network akin to Facebook or Twitter or the others, but with kind of this unspoken set of rules about professionality and being able to take your mask off and talk about your profession in a very specific way. And I think that's just a really key differentiator here that would encourage anybody to kind of start ASAP.
It's a great point. And to that note, remember that the cannabis industry is growing. It's growing in an accelerating way. And so for everybody here that's getting in touch with the cannabis community through LinkedIn, remember that community is going to grow and grow and grow. So that's a really good point. Matthew, what would you add on top of that?
Yeah, all of the above, to be honest. I think the main point I'd highlight, and I've done in the past, is that it likely would have been a much easier decision for LinkedIn just to censor cannabis content. I'm sure there's a lot of professionals whom don't have the same appreciation for the plant as we do. Whereas they chose the path of, most resistance And I think it's paid dividends for them, and it's definitely paid dividends for us, which is why I do encourage everyone to take advantage of the opportunity, which is really what we're going to get into in the presentation today.
And to that, Matthew, we're going to hand it right back to you, because this one is something we all believe in. I think a lot of people attending this webinar have seen this idea. We've seen it outside of the cannabis industry, and I think it's potentially even more true, not to devalue anywhere else, but in cannabis, your network is your net worth. Matthew, take us through this.
Yeah, I know this sounds like awfully cliche, and to a certain extent it is, but it's true. Like it's very true that your net worth is your net worth, and I think it's even more true in our industry, whereby, you know, it is still so small in comparison to what it will become, and the relationships you build today are going to be the relationships which generate, you know, ridiculous business opportunities in the years to come. And even outside of that, these are just the relationships you want to have in place, such that as the industry inevitably becomes global, you get to participate in the globalization of cannabis. So for someone like myself who's in Ireland, like I commonly work with companies based in California, Toronto, Vancouver, etc. And that's all come courtesy of using LinkedIn. So what I would highlight is that, yeah, the industry is going global. And if you do want to participate in the globalization of the industry, then making that investment today will pay tremendous dividends in the forthcoming years.
Really good point. Brett, what are you going to put on top of that?
You know, I think the icing on the cake with that is the only reason we're here is because of LinkedIn, and we are each other's networks, right? That's kind of the end state here is that we all interact solely because we are interactive on the platform and solely because we started doing this. So this entire thing is kind of a proof of concept for the idea that your network is your net worth. And I think it goes well beyond us. Obviously, there are plenty of people doing big things in the cannabis industry on LinkedIn that aren't us. But I think the key point here is that you can find each other all the time. It's very easy to find people to work with. It's very easy to find potential clients. It's very easy to make lifelong friends, for that matter, when you can just start interacting in this very global and open way about who we are, what we do. And I think that's a huge thing. You know, I guess that would be kind of the end of my thought on this one, since it's very much the same as everybody else's.
It's a good point. And the focus here so far in this slide has been globalization. Remember, too, that LinkedIn can be very useful to meet people in your local area as well. I've met a number of people through the platform right here. I'm based in Massachusetts. We're getting ready to launch a brand in August. And it's been amazing to have people reach out and say, hey, you're in Milford. Oh my gosh, I saw that. And then next thing you know, we actually are going for a socially distanced walk to talk business, which is such a relief considering the conditions all of us have been enduring over the past year. It's also important because we know the regulations are different everywhere, and it can always be helpful to work with people who are very familiar with the regulations within whatever market you're planning to participate in. Now, getting started. We're going to begin with building your profile. Brett's going to take us through writing a really great headline, the About Me section and how to write that, as well as leveraging your featured posts. That's another section, your experience, before finally touching into skills. Go ahead, Brett.
Hey, thank goodness I'm back. I lost camera for a second. So touching on our profile a little bit, it's really easy to kind of draw a parallel to a human interaction, like a real life street interaction when we start talking about a profile. Because really, what are we doing? We're humans on the opposite ends of computers, and we only have so much information to go on. And something in human interaction is that kind of initial judgment in the first 10 to 30 seconds that everybody makes. It's not a bad thing. I'm not accusing anybody of anything, but we all do it subconsciously. It just is what it is. So the very first thing to kind of think about when you're building out a profile or thinking about it is that headline, because your headline goes wherever you go. When you comment on something, it's got your name, your picture, your headline. Name, picture, headline, name, picture, headline. Those three things follow you everywhere on LinkedIn. So when you're crafting a headline, what I've found to be the most beneficial is kind of a three-part breakdown. One being something eye-catching. So for example, using mine, bridging the gap from bong to boardroom, people immediately go, oh, that was different. That was a different thing than I'm used to seeing. And then I think it's important to notate your role in the industry. CEO at this, vice president of this, director of that, manager of this. And then one other additional detail, either something that makes you unique or special or some specific industry designator. So for example, mine for the longest time was bridging the gap from bong to boardroom, space, CEO at Good Ideas, space, cannabis and hemp public relations, right? Something like that. And I think a similar format would be something that would work for anybody. Now, if we're using this kind of initial interaction modeling for the rest of this, the second most important piece on anybody's profile is your About Me section. And it doesn't have to be that special or that crazy. It doesn't have to be perfectly written in every way. But what it should do is be impactful and be a short, sweet synopsis of all of the information they're going to see. Some kind of key things, a few things about what you're looking for. If you're like me, also something about getting a cold connection request and that I'm not going to sell you anything, but we'll get into some of that later. The next thing, and I think this is one that most people are not utilizing. I think the first two are things everybody pretty much has. It kind of makes you walk through it when you set up your profile. So those are kind of a given. Just trying to think of some tips and tricks for those. So with the featured posts, this is right below where your name is. So when you have name, headline, there's going to be a little block, and everybody has it. It doesn't matter if you have premium or not. You can put your best performing posts. You could put a news article you've been in. You could put a piece of media. This is kind of like a highlight reel where you have 3 to 5 little boxes to really show off your stuff in a visually stunning or kind of, notable way. Past that, you have the two kind of most important other pieces. That's your experience. This is when we're getting into the traditional piece that we all kind of remember LinkedIn as, your online resume. So my only thought here is be accurate and fill those out as much as you can. Don't just put a job role, but put your job role, make sure you link it to the company, maybe add a few little details in there, managed this or met this goal or exceeded this expectation. And then the last one is skills. Skills are things where you can say, okay, digital marketing. Boom. And other people can basically give you what amounts to a soft reference. Here's my fun little takeaway on this one, and I'll get off my high horse on this. But skills, cannabis is a skill on LinkedIn. You could all go right now and type in cannabis is a skill, rack that thing up to the top of your profile. And remember, we're on a professional network. So if you want a nice kind of first post idea, say, hey guys, how cool is it that cannabis is a skill? I'll endorse you if you endorse me, and grow this piece of the cannabis LinkedIn world just a little bit.
Great points. Matthew, what would you like to add?
I'd say for any business owners that are here, I think it's super important that in the first feature post, link to any sort of accomplishments your business has been highlighted for. So like Vance, 20 cannabis companies, I think it was like top 20 cannabis companies in 2020. Like if you do receive any awards and you're using LinkedIn as a recruiting platform, I think it's super important to highlight, is your company in the news? Because there's a lot of people who are interested in getting into space. And if you do want to hire the most talented people, it's extremely important to just highlight, your company is in the top tier of who is succeeding. So I think it's a really interesting opportunity just to leverage some of the feature sets to more effectively recruit people on the platform.
Okay. What I'm going to add too is when you look at these different sections, make sure if you read them all together that they're coherent and they're also, they match up with each other. Be honest. It's really important that as you're doing this, that, if you're building yourself out as someone who's done a million things, but then your experience doesn't amount to the fact that you're fresh out of, say, college, it's not necessarily going to breathe confidence into what you're trying to accomplish as much as being forthcoming. If you're in a process of you're new and you're looking for something, it's okay to say that. Really make sure that you're not necessarily inflating yourself, but instead you're putting out there something that's accurate and true to who you are. It is highlighting the value and the skills, both soft and hard skill sets that you can bring to the table, and maybe communicates a little bit about what you're interested in. So that way, when somebody's looking at you, potentially for a job opportunity, potentially to reach out to you for services, they know a little bit more about what you're going to offer, but also kind of giving them an idea that when they look at your profile, you took the time to make sure that it appears trustworthy. That's a big part about this. if someone looks at your profile and things look like they're mismatched and they start to raise questions and they're like, that doesn't quite make sense to me, you're already putting some sort of doubt into their head. So what we want to do too is focus on making sure your profile, when you read it all together, that it makes sense as one cohesive unit. And it's going to help build that trust and build rapport and be accurate to exactly what you can offer to somebody. I will add to the About Me section that think of that similar to when we get into writing posts. You can think of that first line as something like a hook. So you're going to want to write something that continues off of your headline to give them some sort of information that's very potent, but high level before you get into, say, more detailed stuff. That being said, you can keep it short and sweet. That's fine as well. It's going to be up to you. But if you're going to get into a much longer About Me section, you really want to focus on starting high level so that somebody who's only going to read the first 1 to 5 sentences, that they're going to get that really nice high level broad picture. And you want to make sure that the first sentence makes them want to read the second sentence, so on and so forth, so that they're engaged. Now, we're going to delve into the value of starting with comments. This is especially effective for people who are a little bit nervous about posting right away and want to figure that out. So we're going to tell you exactly why comments are really a great place to start. And it's actually where all three of us started. Matthew O'Brien's going to go ahead and start us down this road. Please go ahead, Matthew.
Cheers, Matt. So I receive a lot of compliments as to, I guess, the presence I've been able to establish on LinkedIn since I started using the platform. But I think it's super important for people to remember that, we all have to start somewhere. And if you put up a post today, there's a pretty slim likelihood that it's going to go viral on the platform. And to be honest, that's never even a goal of mine, is to create viral content. And narrowing in on a nice starting point for LinkedIn, the place which I started on the platform was that I just identified someone who was putting out the type of content I was resonating with. And when I asked myself, what sort of personal brand, for lack of a better term, that I wanted to establish, it was quite evident that this individual had already sort of succeeded in doing so. That individual was Max Simon, who's the CEO of Green Flower. And as opposed to putting out content as a starting point, what I started to do was just add value to the post which he was already creating. And with that, it sort of had this twofold effect. As a starting point, it did allow me to get what we would call top of funnel awareness for my name. So anyone who was reading the comments would have identified, Matthew O'Brien is partaking in this conversation. And then secondary to that, every now and then a particular comment would receive a lot of engagement. And that signaled to me that particular comment would likely make the very good basis of a post. So when it came to actually deciding, when is it a good time to transition from just actively commenting on people's posts to actually creating your own posts, I think it's a really good starting point to just add comments as a starting point, evaluate and identify which posts or which comments have actually received a lot of engagement, and then use that to create a post which in advance is likely going to do well on the platform.
Really good point. So using comments kind of like a testing ground for future posts, like A/B testing. Brett, what are you going to add?
So I think a fun thing to think about with comments is that comments are a lot easier because they're reactionary. And I think this is a point where we can all agree on that posting every day, a fresh new post or a fresh idea, is not always easy. And I still get the little bit of nerves before I make a post and wonder if it's going to do well, no matter how good my posts do. And I did the same thing as Matthew O did, and I very much started adding people and commenting on their stuff well before I became a poster in my own right. And I find that it gives, like you guys said, a very easy way to start a conversation and spurn some stuff. And if you're one of those people sitting in the audience who kind of answered the poll I put up a minute ago that you rarely post or not very often, comments carry nearly as much weight on LinkedIn as a post does. The algorithm is a little bit different in that comments and likes are worth a lot more than they are on other social media platforms. And you don't actually have to be a content creator to grow your footprint on this platform for any number of reasons. And I think we'll get into this a little bit later with the kind of setting goals, and not everybody wants a viral post or wants to be a big influencer or a thought leader. But it can all start right at the very beginning, from day one. add a couple of profile details, and just go find your favorite person and their opinion. Heck, come on any of our pages. We all we interact with anybody who comments. I will be glad to humor all the comments in the world, and I think any of the rest of us were, because we care about building a real community. It's not just about getting attention. It's about growing our actual network of human beings working together. And I think the best way to do that starts, just like we've kind of highlighted here, making some comments on other people's stuff is very simple and easy way to do. It's just, that's it. That's the easiest way to get started. It allows you to kind of play off of other people's thoughts and ideas, and it doesn't put any pressure on you to do anything but give an opinion. Be yourself.
It's a lot. It was brought up earlier in one of our practice runs of this webinar, and yes, we did practice before this. We talked about the point that it's a lot harder to come up with something from scratch than it is to react to something. And I believe maybe that it was Brett or Matthew that brought that up. And I think it's a really important point. Taking the pressure off, being able to see someone who's already putting stuff out there and then forming opinion, that's a really great place to start. And the other thing about commenting on posts is it's somewhat of a tip of the hat to the person who is posting. As we get into the algorithm hierarchy, you're going to learn also that comments are extremely valuable to the reach of that post. So when you like a post and comment on it, you are to some degree also offering a favor to the person who's producing that comment, or excuse me, that post. And so now let's get into the people who do want to post. Now, remember from the last slide, if all you want to do is comment, you can still create a career. You can meet people. You can learn a lot. You can ask questions. So there's no pressure to post. However, for everybody who wants to take it to that next level, that's where we're going to get into post style here. So in getting started, post style, Brett, let's have you kick this one off.
I don't know who I just saw run by that said they love my last name, but thank you. I love you. And I want to encourage this posting your LinkedIn profiles in the chat. I've seen like 100 of them go by. Follow each other, connect with each other, interact. Please, if you do nothing else from this webinar, do that. Build a stronger community together. Now to actually get back to the post, because I didn't think I was going to be this excited about the chat. There's an actual format to posts that work on LinkedIn, and there's a lot of different reasons they do. I think the biggest key here is that you'll notice that we numbered these 1 through 4. Number 1 and number 2 are the obvious format that all three of us choose regularly. It's the easiest, and the reason there is because a really well put together post does 3 things. It forces a click through, meaning that it forces someone to click the little see more thing in the bottom left. It encourages something that LinkedIn refers to as dwell time, meaning the amount of time someone's physically looking at that little piece on their screen as they scroll by increases the likelihood, right? So what you'll probably noticed is on LinkedIn, there's a lot of people who do very chopped up sentences and they break this up, and that's on purpose. One, it's because it's easier to read on a scrolling screen, and something like 81% of users use LinkedIn on their phone, not on a desktop. But the other reason is because it encourages that little subtle thing. So what I say is I structure all of my posts in a similar way that you would a press release. Headline, subheading, that's what's above the fold. And above the fold, just so everybody knows, comes from newspapers. And if you look at an old-timey newspaper, a newspaper in the box right now, you see a headline, little blurb, and then you physically have to open the damn thing to see the actual body of the paragraphs of the article. The same thing goes for a post. So from my experience, text and picture posts do much better. And by picture post, normally something in meme format. And I know, Matthew, you'll get into that in a second. So I'll kind of focus specifically on these text-only posts. It's pretty simple. Do something catchy and give a little bit of background to that above the fold. Then worry about whatever you're going to say. And it's a lot less important, per post than you would probably think it is. And then at the very bottom, a key piece is a call to action. It can be something like, what do you think? Comment below, and we can get more into that. The other two, I think, are a little bit of unusual rules. So LinkedIn has a severe preference to native content. So that number 4, external links, like if you're going to link an article on a post, don't put it in the post itself. copy and paste something from the article, give a little thought process, and then put something like post in comments, because the actual LinkedIn algorithm is going to go heavily away from these links. And yes, some posts with them can go viral, but I think we kind of, when we did the prep discussion for this, came to the conclusion that they go viral despite being a link, not because of it, and they're actually hurt. Videos kind of fall in the middle there. I don't know that they necessarily are downgraded into the LinkedIn algorithm, but I think we've all kind of experienced that when we do post videos, the reach of them is significantly lower than other posts. That's about what I got on that.
Great. Matthew, your turn.
For sure. So, like, honestly, don't want to just reiterate a lot of what Brett said. But, like, the one point I would add on is that there still is a place for external links, particularly if you're a business owner who's attending this conference, in the sense that, you know, if your business is highlighted in a top publication as having achieved a certain milestone, I do think there's a place for simply sharing that link. So I don't want anyone to receive the impression that we're saying do not use external links, full stop. I think if you're active on the platform on a daily basis and you're optimizing for, you know, whatever thought you're sharing being seen by the most number of people, I often do encourage people not to use external links, because LinkedIn does have that bias towards keeping people in the platform as opposed to allowing people to create funnels, thereby bringing that attention off the platform. So I think there's a place for all this. The problem with videos, as I observed thus far, is that whenever LinkedIn does share a post with a large number of people, they want to understand what is being shared. It's very hard for them to actually sort of decode what is the contents of a video as opposed to text. Thus, it does take a lot of time for you to sort of build up a preference with LinkedIn for them to show your videos to a large number of people. So again, there still is a place for videos on the platform. I personally don't do a lot of videos because I much rather writing in text, and I feel like people would barely understand a word I have to say with my accent anyways. So there's a place for all of the above. I think text, yeah, it's probably going to work the best for most people. Pictures is also something I would consider if you want your post to be shared by a lot of people. An observation that I've made over time is that if you do add a good image to the text, it does substantially increase the likelihood of that post being shared to a number of people, such that if you do want your message to be distributed to the maximum number of people, it is worthwhile to consider, is there a way to sort of create a complementary or add a complementary picture to the text which you have ready to go?
Really good points there. And we're going to get into that on our next slide. Matthew is going to walk us through what causes a post to go viral. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there. Remember that that's not necessarily the point, which is something that Matthew, who you've gone viral several times. Brett, you have a little bit. I have at a low level, both of us. And Matthew's kind of figured out what it is that causes that. Now, what I will say too is, to Brett's point, there was a survey of 5,700 people lately on LinkedIn. Are you viewing this on a desktop or a mobile phone? And they figured out that 81% are in mobile phones. Now that's a big shift. All of us agree that the numbers we were seeing were, I think, far more 50-50, give or sway, about 6 months ago. So even so, this slide in particular would have a very different discussion 6 months ago. When crafting posts right now, it's really important to see how it looks on a mobile device, because as it stands, 4 out of 5 people are going to be viewing it there. So keep that in mind. I will add that on videos seem to have a really high level of engagement. However, as stated here, they don't have a lot of reach. So keep that in mind. If you're looking for a high level of engagement and people to really lean in, you're going to have success there. Again, it's not necessarily going to be shown to as many people. Matthew, go ahead. Take this one away. Why does certain content go viral on LinkedIn?
Sure. I think this is a mystery for most of us. And up until the point which I sort of started to get insight as to what had to occur for a post to go viral. By viral, I mean like for a post to be shown by like 80,000 people, 80, 90,000, 100,000 people. And over time, there's just a few observations I made having had that occur to me, not by intent, I should say. Like my entire motivation to be active on the platform is a lot more to get people talking about cannabis, contribute towards the normalization of cannabis. And that occurs a lot more in the comment section than it does simply, by people liking a post. But the most important point I would add as regards, like if you do want a post to be seen by a lot of people, the first line of the post is always the most important. And the reason why it's the most important is that if someone doesn't click read more on your post, LinkedIn's algorithm will thereby downgrade your post, thus showing it to less people. Secondary to that, the second most important metric, if you want a post to go viral, is the number of people who leave a comment. So a common practice for people who are starting out on the platform is that they'll actually tag people in their network just to gain their thoughts. A best practice, which I've employed, and it's actually worked pretty effectively of late, is simply to ask a question at the end of a post. So in my consultancy work with a number of startups, whenever I'm asked, how do we get high level of engagement, the number one point which I'll always convey is get a call to action. And a call to action might be, would you agree with what I said? What do you think about what I said? But it is a very important point in particular is just add a question at the bottom of your post. And really what that's doing is you're giving a social signal to the person who's consuming that content that you want them to engage with what you've just put out. The third point I would add is the number of likes does have a correlation to the number of people who are going to be shown a post. If a post receives less than 2%, so if your post is shown to 1,000 people and less than 20 people actually, give it a thumbs up, LinkedIn will thereby downgrade that post. Something to bear in mind, but again, I personally don't give a lot of consideration to that. And the last point in particular is just the number of times the post is shared. So to kind of do a full 360, the way which you can sort of increase the likelihood of that happening is just to have a good image supporting the text itself. That is, if you want to create a viral post. I don't strive to do it. I think it still remains a mystery, despite the fact that I've had it happen a number of times now. But this is just like a basic breakdown of what has to happen for that to happen.
And to the point of all of this, remember that going viral is not necessarily something that's going to guarantee bringing you more leads, something like that. Now, as Matthew has pointed out before, if you're trying to get a really broad reach, like an awareness campaign, it can certainly be helpful, increasing your top of funnel feed. However, we all put a lot of emphasis that this is about building meaningful connections and relationships. So that's going to happen in that comment section and getting people into a dialogue. Now, measure what matters. This is the point that I was just starting to make. It comes down to goal setting. So figuring out exactly what you're trying to accomplish on the platform. Is it getting a new job? Is it building up your network so that you can find solutions as you build a company? Are you trying to sell a service? Are you trying to sell equipment? What exactly are you doing there? So starting with that is going to be really important to what you measure. We just talked about going viral. However, there are plenty of people that have a lot of success without going viral ever. They have success with having posts that you might never see. However, they're highly targeted and talking about subjects that are going to be relevant to exactly what they're trying to find. So instead of measuring things like likes and shares, which again could be a goal, it could also be something as simple as how many comments am I getting? How many new people am I meeting that say, if I'm trying to sell a service to businesses, how many new CEOs, if it's a service to the operations team, how many new CEOs and operations people are commenting on my posts? And how many of those are actually turning into conversations in a direct message? That's one example. Brett, why don't you add to that?
So I'm gonna throw out a couple of things here that have nothing to do with this for 2 seconds. I saw somebody post a question specifically on the going viral thing about hashtags, and something we did not include in the slides that we kind of talked about in the build up to this is that hashtags can be overused on LinkedIn, and I think there's a sweet spot somewhere in the 2 to 5 hashtag range. So if you're thinking about it in terms of like Instagram or Facebook or other social media accounts, actually be sparing with your use of hashtags. And then I just ran a poll in the chat, and it looks like a vast majority of everybody, 38%, the largest chunk of all, is really looking to make sales and gain clients. So I'm going to focus on that as a specific goal for here. Posting content is a great way to give yourself a beacon for those potential clients to refer back to, something like the featured post or really nailing something. But the easiest way to do this is in the comments. And we're going to get into the cold DM thing because I think especially for you guys that are trying to gain clients and make sales, it's heavily predicated on getting someone on the telephone, getting a face-to-face meeting. And I think there's a counterintuitive idea that just shooting your shot is going to get you there. And I think that's more of a machine gun mentality than a sniper mentality. And I think that if that's your goal, some of the little tips and tricks we're going to cover on your perfect DM and some of these community building ideas shortly are going to be very important for that. Because I think, especially for you guys, or the ones trying to get a job, which is another 20% of the poll, having meaningful interactions before you go to that one-on-one, let's have a chat moment is the difference for someone like us who gets 30, 40, 50 messages a day, picking up your message in the inbox versus someone else's. We're going to say, oh, I know her face. Oh, I remember his name. I better check out what they have to say. Vice, oh, I just got a connection request and I got hit with the message. But I think we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. I am anyways, getting a little bit ahead of ourselves.
Great. And Matthew, what would you add?
Yeah, I mean, we could probably go like pretty in depth on measuring what matters from a business standpoint. Like if you are solely optimizing for like lead gen, like really what you should be looking for is using the analytics on your software just to see like where is the traffic coming from, how much traffic is actually coming from LinkedIn on a monthly basis. A practice which I employ, I'm sure anyone who sees my content will commonly see it, is that in the first comment on any of my posts is always going to be, if you're interested in learning more about the cannabis industry, check out 4pm.co. And it's a nice way to create that funnel without explicitly making the post solely about that point. So I think there's ways to do it. And I think the higher the level of discretion, so like being discreet about it, kind of seems a little bit counterintuitive, but that's actually the best way to get people to engage with you in a meaningful manner. Like to Brett's point, like you can send 100 people a message a day on LinkedIn, and I guarantee you like 95% of the people aren't going to respond. And the 5% of people who do respond, I would be a little bit questionable as to why they are choosing to respond, because you would never just walk down the street or in a conference and just start, asking people for business. You're going to take the time to develop a rapport with that person prior to actually seeking their business. So I think you just have to think about it more of a long-term time horizon, as opposed to thinking that this has to happen in the first 20 seconds of your encounter with this individual.
Really good points. And what I want to add to that too is, where we're talking about measurement here, I also want to touch on, if you're trying to sell something, I'm going to bring in some ideas from marketing. You want to focus on the benefits. So it's not to say you'll never post what it is that you do, but if you can really get into who you're trying to sell to and what are the problems you're actually trying to solve. I think all of us subscribe kind of to the Tony Robbins, like give, 95% away. And it's really a good way to, one, learn yourself, because when you're putting your pressure on, where you're actually giving away a lot of your knowledge, you're gonna keep learning. And you're also going to draw people who start to say, well, gee, this person seems to teach me something every single day. And I want to caution everybody, if you're worried you're going to give away all your value and they're going to be like, thanks, that's just not true, because nobody's going to retain all of your daily posts. Often these people are busy. They're trying to find a solution. And if they do take some of your information, try and do it themselves, if you have true expertise, then more likely what's going to happen, even in that circumstance, they're going to get frustrated and they're going to come back to you. So focusing on those benefits and problems. And the same goes for all of you looking for a job. If you want to get hired for something, then figure out, one, what do you want to get hired for? Now, I know some people, they're just looking to get into the industry, and that's fine too. If you want to go find an entry-level thing, that's fine. Begin with wanting to learn, wanting to be helpful, and grow with a company. However, if you're trying to enter into a company at a higher level position and you have some knowledge, really focus into the problems you might solve, share your knowledge and experience in a way that's going to be valuable and helpful, so that someone who's looking for a person to help them in a specific role, they're going to have an idea that you are that person. Now, best practices for LinkedIn. This is our final section. We're going to go down the line, starting with, is LinkedIn Premium worth it? Full disclosure, I learned a lot from these two gentlemen, and I don't have LinkedIn Premium yet, but in talking to them, I'm pretty much sold. We're not sponsored by LinkedIn. I want to make that very clear. This is not a pitch, but we've been laughing about it because I actually haven't used it yet. and they're going to walk through why, what they think about it. Matthew, can you kick us off here?
Yeah, certainly. So in the first conversation we had, it was super interesting in that myself and Brett both organically arrived at the same conclusion, which is that there's this profound impact whereby once you have more than 5,000 people in your LinkedIn network, the amount of people LinkedIn is going to show your content towards just substantially increases. I don't know why. I haven't had any conversations with any personnel at LinkedIn to understand why exactly this does take place. But just based upon mine and Brett's observations, it's pretty clear that once you pass that 5,000 personnel threshold, LinkedIn is going to take a much higher preference towards the content you're putting out. And one of the easiest ways to actually start adding people to your network is to get a LinkedIn Premium account. What that's going to allow you to do is it's going to allow you to go onto any company page. So for example, Goodfields, just to take a company off the top of my head, if I wanted to see every single person who works for that organization, with the LinkedIn Premium account, I can simply click on that company page. It's going to give me that full breakdown of who works at that company. And then it's super seamless from there to just start adding those people to your network. Now, if you're not putting out content, not everyone's going to accept the invitation. And that's actually okay. It's perfectly fine. When I started adding people to my network, I think at the start, maybe 50, 60% of people were accepting the invitation. As you start to add comments on other people's posts, as you start to create content, the percentage of people who are actually going to accept that invitation is going to increase alongside that. So from my standpoint, it is the easiest $40 I spend on a monthly basis. I know, Brett, you've much the same sort of opinion on it, but would be curious to hear your thoughts.
I think the biggest piece that really gets it for me on LinkedIn Premium is a little different than it would be for the average person. So I really like knowing who's looking at my profile, and I really like being able to look at other people's profiles without being seen. So those are kind of two different things, and I'm not some shady guy. I do due diligence and vetting on people, so I like to look at them without them knowing I'm creeping on them on purpose. Another key one is you can search companies and see every person who works at that company with a premium account, meaning, oh man, I really want to work at whatever, XYZ, Joe's Weed Company. You can go on and do some very simple social techniques to grow your presence there. So start with people at an equal level of you. Once you add a few of them, add a few more, run all the way up the company profile, and eventually you have 20 or 30 connections in a given company. And this is a very subtle sales or marketing technique that's called building an internal champion. So if it's whether you're looking for them as a client or whether you're looking for them as a job for the company or any other purpose, I think that's a really key piece there. And I think the other one is analytics on your posts. So once you start hitting the 50 reactions, 50 comments and up range, you're going to notice that you can start figuring out who your audience is very well. So like I know for a fact 40% of my posts are looked at by sales and marketing professionals, 35% are founders, 20 something percent are C-suite executives, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And those can be very valuable insights when you're thinking about the whole thing we were talking about earlier of knowing your goal. If your goal is in posting content is the same as ours, and it's to basically be a beacon of knowledge and then worry about the actual interactions and what we do later, I think LinkedIn Premium gives you the ability to know the little details and tidbits that you need to be successful using that kind of ideology.
Thank you very much. Now, moving on in our best practices, scheduling posts on LinkedIn. Should we use a posting app or not? Brett.
Ooh, this is the part where we disagree. Ha! So I think all three of us agree, and we've talked about it a few times, pre-planning your posts to some degree is a good idea. Whether that's like Matthew O and I do and kind of writing out some general ideas or some bullet points in a notebook or a Google Doc or a spreadsheet, that's all good and well. So what Hootsuite does is it allows you to pre-schedule your post ahead of time so that you're, let's say you pick a time that you want your post to go out. And I'll get into why that's important in just a second while I cover this. It'll do it for you, and you can use it for multiple sites. So if you're someone like Matthew O who's growing LinkedIn and Twitter simultaneously, you can kind of keep that homogeny between posts and keep everything scheduled. HubSpot and their posting app I find really interesting because it allows you to look at the way your post is going to look in real time before it's posted. So I don't actually use either one to post ahead of time, but I have in the past and do occasionally still use the HubSpot social aggregator tool to know exactly what I'm talking about. And it all kind of drives back to that under the fold click-through rate, that idea. I want to know exactly where that break line's going to be so that I make sure I pack the top of that post with the impactful information before I get into the body of my post. Yeah, I think that's what I've got on that. Take it away, somebody else.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, for individuals, I actually don't. I find it very hard to justify the cost which most of these platforms charge. So if you want to use something like Hootsuite, I think it's like $40 a month. But at the same time, it's $40 for a LinkedIn Premium. If you compare the benefits and sort of add up the value, for me, it's crystal clear that I'm getting a lot more value from that LinkedIn Premium account versus of simply having access to a scheduler. Now, if you're a business owner and you want to start putting out content from your page, I would strongly advise signing up for a platform like HubSpot or Hootsuite, whereby it is going to allow you to schedule that content in advance, because it's very hard to maintain any sort of consistency if you are putting out content every single day from multiple accounts. And a point which myself and Brett, again, sort of organically arrived at the same conclusion of is that there's this 20-minute Goldilocks zone whereby it doesn't matter if you post every single day or if you post once every second day. What's actually most important about posting, outside of all the other points which you mentioned, is that you maintain the same time every single day which you post. And the reason why is that LinkedIn's algorithm is effectively gaining an understanding of, when it can expect for you to post on the platform. So if, for example, you're posting at 11 a.m., Eastern time, Monday, Friday, and Saturday, or something along those lines, what's most important is just to make sure that you're doing it at the same time every day, such as you're just optimizing for the greatest possible likelihood that that post is going to be shown to the most number of people.
It's a really good point. And to that, in some degree, you're also going to be building some sort of habit with your audience. So when you start posting at the same time, it's like someone looks at their watch metaphorically and they think, ooh, it's that time. So they're going to actually start to expect that your post will be somewhere in that feed, whether it's right at the top or in the first few. And over time, that's going to really benefit you engaging with the people that you're starting to attract to your content. Now, the reason Brett said we disagree is because it's really unknown whether or not these aggregators damage the reach of your post. Does LinkedIn punish you for using a third-party software? Now, I think, Brett, you had said you thought maybe it did. And then on the other side, two of my best performing posts of all time came from an aggregator, came from Hootsuite specifically. They were posted at 8:50 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I was actually sleeping in, doing some late nights the night before in work. And I got out of bed 5 minutes after my post had gone. And to my surprise, I got to talk to a whole lot of people those days. So really, there is no collective proof or evidence that we know exactly of as to whether or not these are going to damage your reach. So I think it ends up coming down to personal preference. Now, this one, Matthew O'Brien's going to take us into. This is to talk about the etiquette of sending a direct message to someone, especially the very first time. Matthew, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, if there's one thing you take away from this conversation, or two, I think it's more important, like if you are interested in posting on the platform, do it at the same time. And second to that, I think the very worst thing you can do on LinkedIn, and I say this from experience in the sense that I initially thought the sort of pray and spray strategy of sending, a multitude of different personnel across the industry messages with the expectation that, a reasonably high percentage of them would respond. The very worst thing you can do is send someone a connection request and then immediately thereafter send them a cold message asking, can we have a virtual coffee? Here's my cookie cutter pitch from my business, my service, etc. So for any of the 31% of people in that poll who specified that the reason why they're using LinkedIn is to generate business or business development purposes, please do not implement the approach which evidently, based upon the number of the messages which myself, Brett, and Matthew receive on a daily basis, of just sending people a cookie cutter message. Take the time to engage with that person in the comment section if they are posting on the platform. If not, first and foremost, invest in actually putting out content yourself. such that at the point in time which you do send that individual message, they're going to recognize your name in advance, which, speaking from experience again of receiving a lot of messages and, simply not having the time to respond to every single one of them, if I recognize the name as someone who's been putting out content, and it doesn't have to be someone who's putting out content and getting, a ridiculous amount of engagement, it substantially increases the likelihood of me actually choosing to respond to that message over the individual who simply just sent me a message and they're specifying, do you want this SEO service? Do you want this, equipment made in China? So just put a bit of effort into developing a rapport with that individual prior to engaging with them in the direct message. And then thereafter, make it as short as possible. Like, our attention spans are decreasing, year over year. So putting yourself in the shoes of that individual on the other end who's receiving that message, make it as easy as possible for them to respond to the question or response or whatever sort of response you're seeking. And that's just my general sort of best practices as it relates to sending messages on the platform.
Great. Brett, what about you?
So I've seen a couple people post this in the comments in the chat on this, and it really makes sense. Know what the person does before you message them at the very minimum. Don't try to sell a guy who sells grow equipment your grow equipment. Don't try to sell a marketer marketing services. Don't try to sell an extraction artist extraction services. Like, I know that sounds obvious, but just think about it beforehand. And it all kind of ties back to, if we all fill out our profiles appropriately and put all of the things, it should be pretty easy for anybody to know exactly what you do and whether you fit. And I think that goes both ways. The other one is, again, develop some rapport and you're going to have a much greater chance of interacting with everybody. Drop some comments, interact with the people beforehand, and then shoot the message. Don't just shoot your shot off the rip.
Thank you. And just for everybody who's in case curious, we are almost done. We will be opening it up to some questions for people who want to stick around a little bit longer, and just want to let you know, as we're 3 minutes over the hour mark, we're down to our final slides. And, I think the really important point here that I'll echo is knowing why you are going to contact someone's really important. Recognizing what the goal is. Are you reaching out to them just to connect and learn something and ask a question? Are you trying to solve a problem for them? If you're trying to pitch a service, Brett, you said this earlier, it's okay to pitch services. However, be thoughtful about it. Like Matthew said, build some rapport. Make sure you know a little bit about the person. And if you are engaging with their content, that's going to be really helpful, because if they recognize you already, you're already going to do yourself a favor. And then keep it short and sweet, because when we get really long messages and there's 5 of them in a row, and we're also trying to multitask during our hot hours where we're doing things online, it's a bit much for us to try and get through. Now, coming down to our final thoughts, Matthew's going to walk us through these. These are 7 simple ideas to get started on your content. Matthew, take it away.
For sure, but cheers to that. The final point I'll leave you is that for anyone who has taken the time to stay with us over the course of this hour, and you're bought into the idea that being active on LinkedIn makes sense for whatever strategy you're seeking to employ. One of the hardest parts, and even for myself, and I'm sure Brett, Matt, you'll probably attest the same point, is that it's very hard to create content on a sort of recurring basis, whether that's daily, whether that's every second day, because you almost feel like you've come up with some sort of original idea such that it's worthwhile to share. So these are just some of the items which I've identified as being what I would call like high performing types of content. So your past experiences, it could be I had a positive experience, a negative experience. Ideally, it's relevant to the domain which you're seeking to sort of build or be recognized as having domain expertise within. Your weekly learnings, if you're a marketing manager, it might be sharing like a tactic that worked phenomenally well. Again, a bit counterintuitive, because there's this sort of perception that we're all competing against each other. I think in the reality, as we've seen from this conversation, to a certain extent, the opposite is true. I think we're all sort of better off when we all help each other. The saying is like, what is it? A high tide raises all ships. Your tactics, again, very much just touching upon like things that are working for you. Like the reality is, like if you're in Massachusetts and someone else is, on the opposite coast, there's a very low probability that, what you're giving away is going to come back to bite you in the ass. If anything, it's probably going to get you like, more invitations to speak at events, which in turn is going to help you build your brand. Side projects, Again, go back to this idea of like your personal brand. At the end of the day, like a personal brand is you. That is really the core point we were seeking to communicate. It is you in every sense of the meaning. So if you are working on a few side projects, like don't be afraid to share it with the community, see if there's people out there who might be able to help you. And then what you're genuinely curious about, just your interests. For me, like I'm definitely interested in cannabis, as everyone is probably aware at this point in time, but I'm also very interested in like economics, just in business in general. Your failures, this is a point which we had discussed earlier in the conversation offline, which is that like when you're building a relationship in person, like any relationship is built on the basis of trust, and being vulnerable with a individual as to like certain things that haven't gone well for you is actually a phenomenal strategy to build a relationship with someone virtually as it is in person. And then your best work, like don't be afraid to highlight, successes you've had. Obviously we've said failures, but conversely, like if you have succeeded, don't be afraid to share that with the community. You'll be very positively surprised as to the positive response you'll receive from just putting that out there in the world.
That's a really good point. Brett, what about you? Some final thoughts.
So I think my final thoughts here are two things we kind of touched on in our practice run and forgot here is if you are going to post, pick a time of the day and try to be consistent with it. There is a Goldilocks zone in posting content. I know for Matthew O and I, it's at the very beginning of the morning, like 8 to 8:30 Eastern time. And the other thing is, if you're a business owner, if you're someone who has a team around you, encourage everyone to interact with each other as much as possible. I've said it a few times in my life that LinkedIn is a team sport. And I think a big reason all of our profiles grow is because we work together. And we talk to each other regularly. Something that kind of came before this webinar was, well, do you know Matthew Harold? I've seen his post. And I'm like, yeah, dude, I text him. Or, oh, have you heard of Matthew O'Brien? I love his post. Yeah, man, we talk all the time. So start thinking that way. Grow together, build together, be a community. And I love the fact that this poll result tells me that a third of people got at least 5 connections out of this. To answer some of the questions I've been seeing in the chat regarding this, I'm going to do my best to start something that lets everybody start interacting together, maybe an attendee list. I think a good suggestion might be as soon as this is over, I'm going to make a post in the actual event with the RSVPs. So everybody can just drop their name and say, hey, I was an attendee, connect with me. And let's be unashamed about what this is about. It's about networking. It's about growing a community. It's about being together. Do it. Connect with each other. Unashamedly interact. These are other human beings with the same problems, the same goals, the same wants as you. Be human together.
That's a fantastic point. And Brett, I'm going to go ahead and correct your statistic. It looks like...
Oh, did it change?
5 or up. It's actually 62% of people have at least 5 new connections today. Connected. It'd be awesome to see that poll hit 100%. It's really ultimately about us lifting up this industry into its maturity in the way that I think all of us have a similar place in our heart and our minds that we want to see it to go. And so what we're hoping that in these final thoughts is that you have some ideas, you have some confidence to get started, some new tools. And in full disclosure, I've talked to these two guys a lot. I really struggle with the discomfort of posting online. It's something that I'm constantly working on. It's uncomfortable. I've started to post some videos recently. And let me tell you, there are times before I film those videos that I sit in the car and I have to convince myself not to say, you know what, it's easier not to do it. So remember that about yourself. If you're feeling uncomfortable, know that we can be uncomfortable together. We can lift each other up. There will be people to support you. And ultimately, that comes back to building your network. When you focus on being authentic, but also having a strategy for what you're trying to accomplish, what values you're trying to share, you're going to attract the right people. It's okay to ignore negativity, and it's also okay to accept success as you start to grow. So make sure you know that. Now, we are going to be opening it up to questions. However, I know some people are probably going to take off now, so I'm going to jump 2 slides ahead just to say, before we come back to questions, thank you all for aren't going to stick around and those who are going to stick around. Thank you so much for coming. Again, it comes to you today, sponsored by Good Feels, Good Ideas, 4 p.m., Headstash Marketing and Multi-Chain Ventures. We are so excited that we got to share all of this with you. It's come out of a collective over 3 years, I would say, of experience and research of specific cannabis, LinkedIn, marketing, and networking. And so some final thoughts here on what we're hoping for is that all of you will find a way to help us build the industry that we want to see. And that it's going to be a really bright future for all of us. Now, Brett, I'm going to turn it over. We're now kind of live improv. So anyone that wants to stick around, we're going
I see a good question.
Questions. What do we have? Read it out loud. Let's do it.
Do you find you see more content from those you're connected with versus those you're following? I would say no. I see about equal. Following and connecting doesn't really matter, though connecting is a preference. I will throw out there that there is a 35,000 limit cap to connections. So once you start hitting that higher levels, which none of us are there yet, I think I'm at like 18,000 or something, that becomes a problem, but I don't think it's a problem for anybody. I would heavily skew everyone to say connect over follow, just so that you can actually start messaging each other. You don't have to use in-mail credits or something like that.
Right. And remember still the etiquette of direct message. That does not mean connect and direct message and start blasting them right away. It's important to build some rapport. Now, if you have looked at their profile, remember if you can see a connection that's going to be useful for a direct message right away, that's okay. Just know to keep it sweet. Find a way to hook their attention so that they know you're coming to them with something that's prepackaged with value. And that's going to come from maybe reading into what their own posting activity, what are they commenting on, and getting familiar with that LinkedIn profile that they have. I also want to say thank you so much to Stephen, George, and Sarah for posting some really nice comments. I appreciate the support. Now let's get another question. Do you see any, Brett?
Yeah, I got, what did you say the best way to connect with those on this webinar? I'm going to make a post in the event immediately after this saying, hey, everybody that attended, put your name out here. Unashamedly connecting with each other. Don't be afraid to say, hey, I was there. Hey, I participated. Hey, I've got a question. Let's continue this chat forever in the comments on LinkedIn. I think that's the beauty of what we're doing here, right?
I think so. That's a really good point. So, Brett, thank you for taking care of that. I'm scrolling. Genuine. Let's see. Alex, what is the second one?
I got one for how do you balance work life with LinkedIn on your phone? I'll be honest with you. I struggle with that terribly. It is a point of contention in my household, though I think setting clear boundaries on that is the answer. Don't do like I do. Do what I say to do.
There you go. I know we talked about this on a Clubhouse. Me, Matthew, and Stephen George we were doing conversations like this on LinkedIn. And I asked a few people who were busy, not just on LinkedIn, but other social media channels. And some strategy I heard was time blocking. I believe Matthew likes to break his time into 30-minute chunks. The other person I was talking to was Cree, and I forget her last name. My apologies. However, she was also saying that she chunks time as well with Clubhouse, 30 minutes. Maybe it's more. I think she used to chunk like 2 hours at a time. As soon as that time was up, discipline, get off, don't fry your brain. That's super important. I think we also have some cool stuff here. Best way to work with company profile as well as rebranding yourself on LinkedIn.
I was going to say I saw that one.
What do you think, Brett?
I'll take company first. Company is really hard. LinkedIn is a personal profile platform. It is heavily predicated on that. So something like what Matthew O'Brien does is really intelligent. It's that subtle push toward the company page being the thing and utilizing the thing you have. You have teammates, you have people that you can build a little community with off the rip. And I use something that I call being the Avengers, right? So like, think of your team as the Avengers. Iron Man's great. Captain America is great. The Hulk is great, but together they're better. So focus heavily on the company pages and think of focus heavily on the individual pages and maybe think of the company page as an afterthought that you tag in the comments or something that you tag in the post and let it happen organically, because really what LinkedIn's about is personal branding over company branding. And I'm not saying company branding doesn't work, but the purpose here is personal.
And we also see often personal profiles outgrow company pages. And so when we look at company pages, one strategy I started to employ that was working is trying to make that LinkedIn page for a company a little more interactive, a little more personal. The same strategies we use on our personal profiles seem to work with those company pages. And also making sure that whatever you are posting as a company, is it really about the company or is it about the audience? So always focusing on bringing something to the audience that they're going to want to see. That doesn't mean that they don't want to see something about the company. It's just, or is the message or the content that you're putting out there, is it going to be more focused on trying to say, look at me, or is it more sharing something that's going to be of value? And let me be honest, success companies like benchmarks, those are often exciting things, but you also want to cushion them with something that's going to connect with people. And often that's going to be somewhere in the way of emotional, depending on the company. It could be just talking about what's your area of expertise. Like if you're a B2B business, it could be talking about, what are, again, the benefits of working with you. Let's start some discussion. So I think sometimes company pages, remember, you would have to invest in that. So if you're looking for something that's passive, you're feeling a bit more lazy about it, it's not necessarily going to work. In that case, yeah, I would say focus on personal profiles and create those gentle funnels. So going into
our last question, are we calling the how do you rebrand yourself on LinkedIn our last question?
Is that our last question?
I think it could be, yeah. I don't see any others that we haven't really touched on yet. And I think we're well over time. So maybe we'll wrap it up with this one. We already lost Matthew O'Brien, of course. It always happens in the tech world. So
it does. I'm going to put one in there that I think we can answer really quick. It's from Devin. He asked, is it okay to put a short message and explains what you do in a connection request? Oh, Brett, I would like to call on you to answer this question.
No, I was waving at someone that said they had to bounce in the comments. Yes, I would suggest. So I'm going to tackle both of the rebranding questions because I've seen it happen 3 times now. And
yeah, I want to tackle that too, for sure.
Just do it. This is not an industry you can jump in with one foot in. Take the leap if this is what you want to do. And remember that we're slowly gaining an era of legitimacy where people from mainstream industries are jumping in all the time and they're jumping out all the time. There's been plenty of bad and terrible things that have happened in cannabis, and many people have made successful transitions out. So don't think about it in these pre-prohibition ways of, oh my God, I'm going to scare my pre-industry contacts, or, oh my God, I don't know what's going to happen if I decide I don't want to be in weed anymore. It's okay. You can make the transition back and forth. And if you're going to join the cannabis community, I think your biggest modality to success is to do it all the way. Start rebranding, stick to your expertise. And something I tell clients all the time, we are all transplants. Every single one of us came from another industry before. I mean, maybe 1% of the industry is somebody who's been, pulling water buckets to the grow tent since they were 8 or something, but most of us work somewhere else. I worked at Harley Davidson. I know everybody else in most of my network has worked in some other field before. So just think of this as a different niche, and remember you can bring your skills over with that. So sales is sales, marketing is marketing, whatever is whatever, as long as you start tailoring it toward cannabis as like a public way, especially in LinkedIn, because I'll be honest with you, a cold connection with cannabis is pretty much as good as it's going to take to get me to say yes to the connection. And I've seen that play out in my favor pretty well in the past.
That's a really good point. Rebranding takes time. So, when you look at our presentation we just gave, go back to the beginning. If you want to change the direction of what you're doing, start with finding some new content that you're going to begin to engage with and comment on. Because part of this too, if you want to rebrand, you also want to surround yourself with a stream in your newsfeed of content that's going to be relevant to the direction you want to go to. And you could kind of think of the algorithm like your little pet. And so you have to train your pet so that the pet kind of walks around to the nice spots that you want it to go. And starting with those comments is going to help. using hashtags, yes, that's going to help shift as well. So use those wisely. And again, like Brett was saying, really focus in on one, be patient, but look to just do it. It takes time. So don't think you're going to snap your fingers or rub a magic lamp and then instantly you're going to be rebranded. Building a brand the first time takes time. It's not going to be any different from rebranding. Is that it, Brett?
I saw one more really good question. They asked about certifications. I'm going to be real honest with everybody. I don't think any of the current certification programs are as much as they promise to be. I think they're really good if you're looking for some baseline education, or if you think you're a really qualified candidate that just wants that one little piece of social proof that say you have a stake in the industry or a little bit of extra thing. But I'll be honest with you guys, I'm not comfortable saying any one cert is good or not. I'm not comfortable saying that one is as good as guaranteed a job. And I think that a safe point to that is we're getting to a point where actual continuing education credits from actual accredited universities are becoming a very real thing. And I think we're going to see a dramatic shift in cannabis education very soon. So I would weigh the pros and cons for your own personal needs on the certification thing. I have one. I don't think I've talked about it in 4 years, and I don't think anybody cares that I have it because I know what I'm talking about in the industry. I don't even know if you have one, Matthew, but I'm assuming no.
Nope. No, I don't. There was one that I really wanted to take. So, before 3 months ago, unfortunately, something happened at one organization that I really liked, and I was hoping that would be the answer I'd give. But it looks like they've somewhat stagnated due to some changes. I think Brett's point's really, really poignant. There is going to be a lot of legitimacy coming through colleges and universities as they're building programs that go across compliance and law into operations, the economics of cannabis, the science. They're really trying to put these programs together. And I think to some degree, waiting for those is going to be helpful. And really, some of these other certifications, if they get accredited, that means they've gone through somewhat of a rigorous process that you don't just get an accredited program out of nothing. It means you have to do the work and show that there's a reason your program deserves that seal of quality and approval. And as Brett pointed out, there just aren't any that we've found just about yet. So I would say hold off on that. Okay, I don't see.
All right, I think that's it, right? Yeah.
I think that's it. So just to repeat, thank you so much, everybody, for coming today. Brett, we had a random question about, is Green Flower not accredited?
As far as I know, they are not accredited.
So there's that. Thank you, everybody, so much for coming today. This was a real pleasure. It was a first-time webinar for me personally. Brett's had some good experience on that. I hope you enjoyed it. We put a lot of work into this, and we hope ultimately that you found some new connections today. You got some new tools, and you also have some new confidence knowing that we're all rooting for you because we're going to build a very special industry together so that when we all look back, we're going to remember these times and think, wow, we did that together. That's going to make it all the more sweet. What about you, Brett?
Thanks, everybody, for coming. I don't know what we expected when we started, but I think we had a damn good time, and I hope everybody got some value out of this.
Amen. Take care, everybody.
Bye, everyone.